I sheltered a poor old man and his dog in a snowstorm. The second they stepped in, the dog growled at my wife's locked desk, scratching like crazy. "Hey, stop." I opened the drawer. And what I saw froze my blood. Then my phone lit up. The night it started, the lake effect snow was coming in sideways, thick enough to blur out the porch light and stick to the windows like frosting. I was standing in my kitchen stirring chili. Nothing fancy, just a throw it in the pot and hope kind of dinner and pretending I wasn't counting the minutes. My name's Curtis Turner. I was 36 then, teaching third grade in a public elementary school about 10 minutes outside Messina, New York, right up near the Canadian border. Still lived in the house my parents left me. One floor, no basement, not much insulation, but it was paid off and I could get from couch to coffee pot in about 5 steps. That was good enough for me. My wife, Teresa Turner, wasn't exactly the homebody type. She was 35 at the time and ran logistics ops for her family's regional freight business. She spent more time at off-site conferences than I spent sleeping. Sometimes she'd text from Pennsylvania, sometimes Connecticut, once from St. Louis like it was no big deal. I'd quit asking questions years ago. That night, I had her favorite cheap apple pie from the store on the counter, trying to make it feel like something. She was supposed to be home by 8. She called a little before 9. "Roads are trashed," she said. "All the hotels are booked. I'll probably stay overnight near Watertown." Her voice was clipped, professional, like I was a client wasting her time. Before I could say anything, she added, "Don't wait up." And hung up. Quick note, before listening, share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and let's continue. I just stood there holding the phone like an idiot. I didn't believe the hotel thing. Teresa always had a plan. Always. If she was stuck, it was because she wanted to be. 20 minutes later, somebody banged on the front door. Not a polite knock. 3 hard thumps. Urgent, like whoever it was didn't want to be out there a second longer. I figured maybe one of the neighbors had spun out or needed help digging a car out. I opened the door and saw a man in his late 60s bundled up like he was headed for the Arctic. Big brown coat, heavy gloves, snow crusted around his hood. Beside him sat a golden retriever, tail thumping slow, snow packed around his legs like he'd been out a while. The dog didn't bark or jump, just looked up at me, calm and tired. The man introduced himself. "Name's Harold Perry. Sorry to bother you so late, but I got caught checking on a couple of community folks I help out. Couldn't make it back to town. Phone's about dead. Any chance I could warm up inside for a few minutes? Just the entryway, I swear." He was embarrassed. I could see that. People who ask for help like it costs them blood. That's real. I opened the door wider. "Come in. Take your boots off. I've got the stove going." I set him up at the kitchen table with a mug of tea. The dog, he said the name was Jasper, sniffed around, slow, respectful, not a stray, definitely not wild. Perry explained that he worked with a volunteer canine group, not official police stuff, more transport and fostering. Said he'd found Jasper limping by the side of a county road a few days earlier. No tags, no chip, but clearly trained. "He's been calm since I picked him up," Perry said. "Friendly, bit cautious. But tonight's different." I nodded, half listening, half wondering if Teresa would even bother texting again. Jasper paced the house like he knew it. He didn't jump on furniture, didn't beg, just wandered, tail low. Then he stopped at the door to Teresa's little home office. It used to be my dad's den back when this was his place. Now, it was where Teresa kept her company files, which she never let me near. Jasper stepped forward, nose twitching, then pressed his snout to one of the desk drawers. It was locked, always was. His body went stiff, his ears flattened, and then he growled, low, steady, like he was warning a stranger off. A second later, he started scratching at the wood like his life depended on it. Hey, I said, stepping over. "Easy, boy." Perry stood up fast, snapped his fingers, and said, "Leave it." Calm, practiced. The kind of voice people use when they've worked with dogs that actually listen. Jasper backed off, but he didn't take his eyes off that drawer. I didn't either. Perry stood next to the table, hands still hovering midair like he expected Jasper to make another move. The dog didn't, but his eyes didn't budge either, fixed on that drawer like it had kicked him once and owed him an apology. "That one's my wife's," I said, nodding toward it. "She keeps business stuff in there. Contracts, logistics forms. Her company's got her on the road more than she's home, so she uses this space to catch up." Perry gave a polite nod. No judgment, no comments. But something in his expression shifted like a switch flipping behind the eyes. He wasn't just some stranded neighbor anymore. He was processing, collecting details like a guy who knew how to read a situation. Outside, the wind hadn't let up. It kept throwing snow against the house in gusts, loud enough to drown out the hum of the fridge. I grabbed a spare blanket from the hall closet and tossed it over the couch. Perry tried to wave me off. "I'll be out of your hair soon," he said. "Just needed a few minutes." His hands were trembling slightly, even with gloves on. I didn't make a big thing of it. Just pointed to the couch. "Storm's not going anywhere tonight. Might as well be warm." He gave in after a moment, sat down stiffly, and pulled the blanket across his lap. Jasper curled up at the foot of the couch, but his eyes kept darting toward the den like he was waiting for something else to happen. I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed. But I didn't get much sleep. Not because I thought Perry was some kind of criminal. He was calm, careful, almost too polite. But Jasper's reaction wouldn't stop looping in my head. That growl wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression either. It was personal. That dog had smelled something inside that drawer, and it hit a nerve. By morning, the snow had gone from loud to heavy, thick and wet, like it was trying to bury the whole world. I made eggs and toast while Perry washed his hands at the kitchen sink, then set a bowl of water on the floor for Jasper and split some bacon between his plate and a paper towel for the dog. Jasper didn't move until Perry gave a little nod. Then he patted over, sat politely, and waited again. The kind of training that doesn't happen in a backyard. That dog had lived with someone who cared. Not just put food in the bowl kind of care. Real structured care. "Used to help with canine events," Perry said casually. "Searches, fundraisers, community days. I'm not a cop or anything. Just an old guy who likes being useful." He scratched Jasper behind the ears and added, "Whatever he picked up in that drawer, it wasn't paper. I've seen this before." That was memory. Association. I nodded, but I didn't say anything. My stomach had been in knots since before sunrise. Perry stood up, pulled an index card from his wallet, and wrote a number on it with blocky, careful handwriting. Then he handed it to me and said, "If you hear anything about a missing golden retriever, give me a ring. I'll keep asking around." As he zipped up his coat, he gave me a look. Not pity, not warning, just direct. "And if your wife asks about the dog's behavior, tell her I startled him. Leave yourself out of it." He left it hanging there for a beat, then reached for Jasper's leash. The dog didn't resist, just trotted beside him with that calm gait like nothing had ever happened. But when they stepped out into the snow, Jasper stopped, turned his head once, looked back at the house. I closed the door. After they left, I walked straight into the den. The drawer was shut tight, locked clean, no visible damage, just 3 shallow scratch marks near the bottom right edge. The kind that wouldn't show up in bad lighting, but were deep enough to feel with a fingertip. The kind that said something inside that drawer didn't sit right. Mid-afternoon, the district sent out a text saying schools would likely stay closed another day. Normally, I'd have taken that as a bonus. Extra sleep, a slow breakfast, maybe a couple chores, but the house felt too quiet, not peaceful, hollow. Around 5, I got a text from Teresa. Not hi or made it safe. Just don't touch anything in my office. I'll handle it when I'm home. That was it. Cold. Final. I stared at the screen for a long time. Could have been coincidence. Maybe she was being practical. Maybe she'd had a long night. Maybe Jasper was just confused by old smells. But I'd been married to that woman for over 6 years. I knew the difference between routine and reaction. And that text wasn't routine. I didn't respond. I walked to the kitchen, took Perry's index card off the table, and slid it into the front of a worn notebook I kept in the drawer where we used to stash coupons. I'd stopped using it after we got married. But something about holding it again felt right. I wasn't about to start snooping through Teresa's stuff. Not yet. But I also wasn't letting that drawer disappear from my memory. There was a reason Jasper went still in that room. I didn't know what was inside. But from that night forward, I was paying attention. The front door opened a little after 6 o'clock in the morning, and I knew it was Teresa before I even turned around. Not because she made noise. She rarely did, but because the air in the house shifted. She came in with that fast, efficient walk like she was late for something. Coat still on, rolling suitcase left by the door. She looked wrecked in the way only people with control issues ever do. Her face was pale, eyes tired, but her hair was perfect. Not slept on, not messy, controlled. She walked past me like I was a chair that had been moved an inch out of place. I stepped toward her anyway and wrapped my arms around her shoulders. For half a second, she stiffened. Just a half beat, enough for me to feel it. Then I caught the smell. It wasn't her usual clean citrus soap. This was heavier, floral, expensive, The kind of perfume that lingers on coats and doesn't belong in my small kitchen. "You okay?" I asked. "Want some coffee?" She pulled back and gave me a look like I'd asked her for a favor she didn't owe me. "I have a call at 9 o'clock, she said. "I need sleep." No apology, no explanation. She went straight down the hall and shut the bedroom door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Teresa had always traveled. That part wasn't new, but this was different. There was an edge to her that morning, sharp and restless, like she was irritated by the fact that I existed in the same space. Looking back, that's what people do when they're trying to keep you off balance. They act like you're the problem for noticing. I stood there a moment, then picked up her coat from the back of the chair to hang it. As I lifted it, something slipped out of the inside pocket and hit the hardwood with a clean hollow sound. A key. Small brass. Not a house key. Too short. Too specific. I stared at it in my palm longer than I want to admit. My first instinct was to put it back and pretend I hadn't seen it. That's what a lot of people would have done. That's what Teresa counted on. But Jasper hadn't scratched that drawer for nothing. Teresa hadn't sent that text unless she thought I might find something. And Perry hadn't looked at me the way he did unless he thought I was standing next to a problem I hadn't named yet. I went into the den and shut the door behind me. The desk was exactly how Teresa left it. Neat, organized, locked drawer right where it always was. I slid the key in and turned it. The lock opened smooth. Too smooth. Like it got used a lot. I pulled the brass key back out and slipped it into my pocket before I even looked inside. Inside were folders stacked neatly, envelopes labeled in Teresa's tight handwriting, a couple of receipts folded clean. All boring, all normal. Until my eyes caught something that didn't belong. A watch. It was a women's bracelet watch. Silverton toned, thin band, small face, delicate in a way that suggested it wasn't meant for daily wear. It wasn't tossed in there either. It had been placed carefully, wrapped in a soft cloth. I picked it up and flipped it over. The engraving hit me right in the chest. Kayla Hill, 30th birthday. Clean lettering, professional, a gift, personal, not something you misplace, not something you end up with by accident. My mouth had gone dry when I heard Teresa behind me. She didn't yell. She didn't gasp. She just stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes flat and cold. The look she used at dinner parties when someone said something she deemed beneath her. She stepped forward and took the watch from my hand like I was a kid holding something sharp. "You shouldn't go through my things," she said evenly. "Who's Kayla Hill?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Nobody you need to know." "That's engraved," I said. "That's not paperwork." Her jaw tightened just a bit. Then she smiled. Not a warm smile, a controlled one. "You're paranoid," she said. "Living in this house has made you small. You sit here all day with kids and snow days and you invent drama because you're bored." I felt the hit land, but I didn't step back. "Where did you get it?" I asked. She slid the watch back into the drawer and locked it with her own key, a practiced flick of her wrist. Then she looked at me like she was explaining something obvious. "If you ever go through my things again," she said, "I'll make sure people understand you're not stable. I've already had concerns about you for a while." The threat was clean, calm, meant to sound reasonable. She paused, hands still on the drawer, and added almost casually, "If anyone asks, you've never seen that watch." I stared at her, waiting for something. Guilt, anger, anything human. Nothing came. She walked past me and back down the hall, leaving the den door open behind her like she wanted me to sit with it. I didn't follow her. I stayed there, listening to the quiet, the sound of the lock clicking again in my head. I made sure the brass key was still in my pocket and closed the den door myself. By the time I shut the den door, I knew something had changed between Teresa and me for good. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. School reopened 2 days later, and when I walked into the building, it smelled like wet boots and cheap hand soap. The kind of cold weather funk that clings to public school hallways. That's when I met Zach. New kid, 10 years old, skinny, pale, hair a little too short on the sides like someone had buzzed it in a hurry. What stood out though was his expression. Calm, quiet, and dead tired. Not in a sleepy way. This was the kind of tired you see on guys waiting at the DMV with overdue child support and no backup plan. He didn't smile when I introduced him to the class. He nodded like he'd already been through it a dozen times and didn't expect it to go well. And he was right. My class had a few kids who liked to push buttons just to see what happened. They noticed Zach's silence immediately like it was an invitation. It started small, whispering when he got answers right, snickering when he hesitated, bumping into his desk like it was an accident. Zach didn't blow up. He didn't cry. He just started muttering little one-liners under his breath, dry as toast, like he was narrating the whole disaster for an imaginary audience. When one kid accidentally knocked his math book off the table, Zach said, "Wow, physics is wild today." When another moved his backpack 3 seats over and pretended it wasn't a big deal, Zach just blinked and said, "Guess it walked off." Happens. It was funny. Not in a ha-ha way, in the way where you laugh because you don't want to punch something. I shut it down the same way I always do. No big speeches, no fake bonding moments, just clear rules and follow through. The second time someone touched his stuff, they lost recess. A third incident, parent call. Fast, boring justice. That's how kids learn. Still, Zach wasn't just dealing with schoolyard nonsense. You could see it in his shoulders, tense, hunched like he was bracing for something heavier than name calling. During recess duty that Friday, he hovered near the jungle gym for a bit, then slowly drifted toward me like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "Can I ask something kind of weird?" he said, hands jammed into his coat pockets. "Sure," I said. "Do teachers ever get tired of fixing other people's problems?" I looked at him. "All the time." Zach nodded like that was the answer he was hoping for. "Cool. So, you're qualified." It made me laugh a little. Not much, just enough to feel like we understood each other. Over the next week, we had a few more of those quiet conversations by the doorway before class, walking to lunch, waiting for the buses. Nothing dramatic, just Zach dropping little pieces of himself when he thought I wouldn't make a big deal out of them. That's how I found out his mom was Kayla Hill, 39 years old, in a coma after what he called some break-in or whatever. He said it flat, like a weather report. But his hands shook when he zipped his coat one day. I didn't push, just listened. He told me they used to live across the county line, that his mom ran her own business out of their garage and used to make the best waffles on Sunday mornings. He didn't mention a dad, but he did say he had a dog. A golden retriever named Jasper. Zach said he went missing the same night. He's trained. He doesn't just wander off. Someone took him or scared him off, I don't know. I stood there, hearing my own heartbeat in my ears. "What color was he?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Standard golden color. Older. Had a scar by his right ear, kind of hidden under the fur. He tilts his head when you say, 'Buddy,' like this." Zach tilted his own head and gave a faint smile. He looked up at me and added, "One of the things they took was my mom's bracelet watch, the fancy one with her name on it. Her sister gave it to her on her birthday." I stared at him, still in teacher mode, calm face, even tone. But inside, my stomach sank. I already knew the engraving. That afternoon, Principal Dana Vaughn called me into her office and closed the door behind us. She offered me tea, which I declined. That's how I knew something was off. She sat down slowly and said, "This is just a heads up. The district got a call. Someone asked if you've been okay lately." They didn't give a name. Just said they were worried about stress, finances, and erratic behavior. I didn't say anything. "I don't believe any of it," she said. "But I'm supposed to pass it along. Think of this as an early warning, not a warning shot." I nodded once. "Thanks for the heads up." I went straight home after work and called Mr. Perry. "Hey," I said. "That retriever you were fostering, did he have a scar by one ear and a habit of tilting his head when someone says, 'Buddy'?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Not confusion, recognition. "Yeah," Perry said. "That sounds like Jasper." I didn't wait. That same night, I called Perry and told him what I knew about the watch, about the kid, about the name engraved where it shouldn't be. I kept my voice calm, but Perry heard it in my tone. He agreed right away to bring Jasper by the school parking lot after dismissal. He was worried it might stir something up, but I told him we'd keep it quiet. Zach deserved one good thing. That next afternoon, I stood just outside the front entrance as the buses loaded up and kids scattered like marbles across the icy pavement. Zach walked out with his hood up and his backpack slung low, dragging like the weight was more emotional than physical. Then Jasper spotted him. The dog froze for half a second, ears perked, tail up, and then he was off. Pure motion. His tail whipped back and forth like a flag in a windstorm, and his whole body started that side-to-side wiggle dogs do when they've completely lost their minds with joy. Zach didn't even flinch. He dropped his backpack in the slush like it didn't matter anymore and fell to his knees. Jasper crashed into him like they were reenacting a movie. The dog licked Zach's face over and over, whimpering, snorting, pawing at him like he needed to confirm every inch of him was still there. Zach laughed. Not the half-sarcastic chuckles he threw around in class to keep people from getting too close. This was a real from-the-chest kind of laugh that cracked wide open and didn't care who heard it. He grabbed Jasper's face in both hands and said, "You dumb dog. You're late." Perry stood a few feet back with his hands in his coat pockets, watching the whole thing like it hurt and healed at the same time. The look in his eyes made it clear he'd gotten attached, too. Probably more than he'd planned to. I clapped Perry on the shoulder. "You did the right thing." He gave a small nod. "Kid needs him more than I do, but I can keep him for now. Yard's fenced, quiet neighborhood. No chaos." Zach looked up from where he was still crouched on the ground, wiping his wet face on his sleeve. "So Jasper's doing a sleepover with a grandpa. That's weirdly perfect." I smiled. "Let's get you home. Sidewalks are still a mess." We walked together through the slush and snow melt, past the salt-stained curbs and piles of gray snow banks that hadn't melted yet. I called the emergency contact listed in Zach's file while we walked. No surprises, no crossing lines. I just wanted someone to know I was bringing him straight home. Zach kept up a steady stream of jokes the whole way. He talked about how Jasper used to fart loud enough to scare himself. How his mom once made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs but accidentally gave one 3 heads. How he used to give Jasper little missions to deliver socks between rooms. He was trying to keep it light, but his eyes stayed serious. At his place, the porch light was already on. A 2-story house, dark red shutters, cracked concrete steps. The kind of house that wanted to look warm from a distance, but didn't feel it up close. Reese Gray answered the door. Late 40s maybe. Clean cut in the artificial way. Fresh shave, combed hair, teeth too white. He had the kind of face that looked like it came from a photo on a real estate sign, like he'd practiced his smile in a mirror and stuck with the version that sold the most. "Hey there," he said, shaking my hand just a little too long. "Curtis Turner, right, buddy? Thank you for walking him home. Appreciate it." He called me buddy twice in the same sentence like he thought it would smooth something over. Zach slid past him without a word and went straight to the kitchen, probably to grab food or disappear upstairs. Reese kept smiling. "Kayla handled most of the finances, but now I'm keeping things afloat best I can. Doctors, bills, lawyer stuff, all of it. It's been a rough season, but we're getting through." He wanted to sound like the hero, like he was holding everything together single-handed. But the way he said we made it clear he wasn't talking about Zach. When I mentioned Jasper gently, Reese shrugged. "Dog's a liability," he said. "They shed, they bark, insurance hates them. Kids get attached and then it's Heartbreak City. You get it? Risk exposure is the last thing I need right now." He said it like he was describing a busted garage door. Not a living creature, not a kid's best friend. Behind him, Zach stood in the doorway to the kitchen, arms crossed, face flat. He didn't say anything until we stepped outside. As we walked down the block, he muttered. "He hates Jasper because Jasper didn't like him." I glanced sideways. "Jasper's a good judge of character," Zach added. "Better than most adults." A minute passed in silence. Just the crunch of boots on packed snow. Then Zach spoke again, softer this time, testing me. "The night my mom got hurt. I was under the bed. I saw boots, big, heavy. Not the guy's face, just the boots. I didn't say a word. I let him keep going. Ree has the same ones," he said. "I know it doesn't prove anything. Could be a coincidence. Like how it's a coincidence your wife is never home." He blinked hard and looked away. "Sorry, that was a bad joke." I didn't answer. I just walked him to the end of the street and watched him go inside. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the lights off for a long time. I thought about the smell on Teresa's coat. The way she touched that drawer like it was hers and mine was to stay in the dark. The way Jasper had gone stiff. Then I picked up the phone and called the non-emergency number for the county sheriff's office. I asked if I could speak with a detective assigned to the Kayla Hill home invasion. The woman on the other end put me on hold, then came back and transferred me. "Detective Elena Marwick speaking." Her voice was sharp but not harsh. I told her who I was, what I did, and that I had a dog in my life who might be part of her case. I said I wasn't trying to accuse anyone. I just thought something might matter, even if I couldn't prove it yet. She didn't hang up. She said, "Go on." Detective Marwick said, "Go on." And I did everything I could tell her without sounding like a man chasing shadows. But the next real blow came at home. That weekend, Teresa was back in the house like nothing had happened. She moved through the kitchen with her mug of tea, checking her phone, making notes in a planner she never let me read. I waited until the moment felt halfway calm. Then I brought up the watch again. I didn't accuse her. I asked plain and careful, "That bracelet watch in your drawer, are you ever going to tell me where it came from?" She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. She just turned slightly, placed one hand on the locked drawer like she was shielding it from wind, and gave me that slow, patient tone people use with toddlers. It's work paperwork, Curtis. You're inventing things again. It wasn't a denial. It was a performance. Like she was already practicing what she'd say to someone else about the interaction. She reached across the counter and touched my wrist like it was part of the script. I think the stress from teaching is finally catching up with you. You haven't been sleeping. You've been quiet. I'm quiet because I'm thinking, I said. Exactly. She said, and spiraling. You should talk to someone before you embarrass yourself, she said, embarrass the way some people say self-destruct. Real soft, but with barbed wire underneath. Then, like it was no big thing, she added, I already mentioned it to someone at the district. They've got support resources. It's totally confidential. I didn't answer. I just stared at her. She smiled and walked off like she'd solved a problem. The next day, Principal Vaughn asked if I could swing by her office after lunch. She closed the door and said HR wanted to schedule a wellness meeting. Language I'd never heard directed at me before. They were checking in about stress, work-life balance, fitness for duty. Van looked uncomfortable even reading the phrases off her notes. That's when I understood what Teresa was doing. She wasn't just hiding something. She was building a narrative. One where I was unreliable, paranoid, one where if I ever opened my mouth, people would smile kindly and dismiss it as burnout or instability. And then Ree showed up again, this time in my inbox. The email was casual, overly friendly, said he wanted to offer me cash to tutor Zach privately. Said, Zach responds well to male role models, and he wanted to create a stable routine. The words looked nice, but the tone read like surveillance, like he was fishing to see what I knew, or worse, to get closer to whatever I might be watching. I wrote back a short, polite no. Told him I wasn't taking private students. He replied within the hour with a smiley face at the end of his message that didn't match the words. No worries, we all have choices. That line stuck in my head longer than it should have. I forwarded the exchange to Principal Vaughn and copied Detective Marwick just so there'd be a record, just in case. I didn't tell Teresa. I didn't say a word. I just started keeping a notebook in my glove compartment. Nothing dramatic, just dates. Notes. Teresa's travel schedules. When she came home angry, when she left and didn't say where she was going, when I got calls from HR, when Ree reached out again, I felt stupid doing it at first, like one of those guys who starts writing everything down like it's evidence. But I also felt a little less alone. The only adult I actually trusted enough to talk to was Perry. I told him the basics. No names, no drama, just that I felt like I was being turned into someone I wasn't. He sat across from me in his kitchen pouring coffee for both of us and said, You ever notice how manipulators never try to disprove the truth? They just go after whoever's saying it. Then he leaned forward and said, She's not fighting what you know. She's fighting you, trying to make you the unreliable narrator. He was right. I didn't want him to be, but he was. One afternoon at school, I stopped by the front office to drop off a discipline slip, and I heard the secretary mention something about Hawthorne Freight. I froze in place. She was on the phone with a vendor, confirming which companies had submitted bids for the upcoming student meals and supply transport contract. Hawthorne Freight was Teresa's family company. She never once mentioned their name being in the mix for school contracts. If anyone ever wanted to paint me as involved, say I'd slipped a number, steered a process, I'd be finished. It wouldn't take a court ruling, just a whisper. That's all it takes in small towns. That night, I sat in my truck longer than usual before going inside. I couldn't unsee the pattern anymore. Teresa wasn't hiding some affair. This wasn't about cheating. It was bigger. She was tying herself to Teresa's money play through the school, and if things got ugly, she'd paint me as unstable and conveniently involved. A week later, Perry invited me over again. Said Jasper had been acting strange, and he thought I'd want to see. I walked into Perry's living room, and Jasper came bounding over, tail wagging, big wet head pressed into my jacket. Normal. Sweet. Then Perry reached over to a side chair and picked up a scarf. It was Teresa's gray with those little stitched diamonds on the ends. She'd left it in my car about 2 months back. I hadn't touched it since. Perry set the scarf on the chair and Jasper stopped wagging. His whole body changed. Not angry, not scared, just locked up. Eyes hard, shoulders tense, tail still. He stared at the scarf like it was a threat. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just backed away slowly, eyes fixed on that thing like it was going to move on its own. Perry knelt down beside him and didn't say a word for a few seconds. Then he said soft and steady, That dog is telling you her scent is tied to something bad. I swallowed hard. I know, I said. I've been trying not to believe it, but I do. The words were barely out of my mouth at Perry's place when I felt the shift in my own chest. Once you say it out loud, there's no pretending anymore. I drove home that night with the window cracked, even though it was freezing, just to keep myself alert. The next day at school, I passed around a big construction paper card the kids had made for Kayla. Stick figures, glitter glue, well wishes, and third-grade handwriting. Zach added a little drawing of a dog that looked suspiciously like Jasper, except with a cape. I brought it to the hospital that afternoon after work and asked the front desk to pass it along. Didn't expect anything. I just didn't want Zach thinking the world had already moved on without her. On my way out, a nurse caught me near the vending machines. Mid-40s, brown ponytail, sensible shoes, sharp eyes. She looked me up and down before asking, "Are you Mr. Turner, the teacher?" I said, "Yes." She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice. "I'm Shannon Reed. Kayla's sister mentioned you've been steady for Zach, that you've been helping." Then she glanced over her shoulder and said, "Be careful." She didn't hand me rumors. She handed me facts. Before the attack, Shannon said Kayla had been asking to speak with a social worker and a lawyer. She didn't say much, but she was worried. Said her partner, Ree, was pressuring her to sign things. Medical power of attorney. Some kind of trust paperwork. I didn't interrupt, just listened. Every word felt like another puzzle piece falling into place. She also mentioned something about changing beneficiaries. She didn't say what exactly, but it was tied to her business somehow. She was scared. That's not gossip. That's from my own chart notes. "Thank you," I said. "Really?" As I walked out to the parking garage, I took the back stairwell like I always did. Less crowded, easier to think. At the second floor landing, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A woman in a charcoal gray coat stepped out of the stairwell on the opposite side. She moved fast, purposeful. That squared shoulder walk I knew better than I wanted to. For a split second, I thought, that's Teresa. Same height, same gait, same tilt of the head when checking her phone. I didn't chase her. Didn't yell her name, just kept walking, slower now, watching as she got into a dark SUV and pulled away like she had someplace more important to be. 2 days later, I mentioned it to Detective Marwick on the phone. She checked the visitor log and a hallway camera. Next call I got, she confirmed it. Teresa had been there that same afternoon. No known connection to Kayla. No stated purpose, just present. So, no, I wasn't losing it. My gut wasn't spinning stories. I had receipts now. Zach gave me another one, and he didn't even mean to. We were walking back from lunch one day, him rattling off nonsense about how Jasper once swallowed a sock hole and acted like nothing had happened. Then out of nowhere, he said, "Ree has these boots, big chunky ones with the little red logo on the tongue. He bought a matching pair for the guy who helps him." I slowed down. "The guy who helps him?" Zach shrugged. "Yeah, he called him his problem solver. Said, real men buy gear that lasts." Went on about it for like ever. The box was in the garage for weeks. Had the receipt taped to the top. Like he wanted me to memorize it. He didn't know why my face changed. I didn't tell him. But I knew those were the boots he'd seen from under the bed. He hadn't said it directly, but the pattern was right there. Reese matching boots. The night of the attack. Teresa showing up at the hospital like a ghost. I told Perry everything, every single piece. He didn't flinch. He just said, "You need to stop playing defense." So, I made a move. Bought a dash cam at the Walmart across the highway. Cheap model, nothing fancy. Mounted it in my truck with adhesive strips and pointed it straight down my driveway. If Teresa or Ree wanted to try something on home turf, I'd have timestamps and video. No more hearsay. "No more," he said. She said funny thing. Right after that, Teresa started acting sweet. Not fake sweet. Professional sweet. Like a company rep handling a high-rises client. She made dinner, asked about my class, even offered to go for a drive together one night to reset things. I didn't trust a second of it. That's the thing about manipulators. They always smile when they're loading the second bullet. The day after she made spaghetti and asked about my lesson plans, I got another HR email. Mandatory evaluation, concerns raised, formal tone, time-stamped exactly 24 hours after Teresa had cooked dinner for the first time in 3 months. I sat in the staff bathroom for 10 minutes after reading it, just staring at the floor tiles. She wasn't trying to argue with me anymore. She was trying to disqualify me, discredit, deconstruct. If she could make enough people believe I was unstable, she wouldn't need to win an argument. My truth would just sound like noise. And if she pushed hard enough, long enough, I might actually crack under the weight of trying to explain it. Perry called that night and asked if I wanted to stop by. Said Jasper was being strange again. When I got there, Perry didn't put on a show. He just confirmed what I'd already seen before. Jasper still reacted to Teresa's scent like it was tied to something dangerous. Perry looked me straight in the eye and said, "You don't have to convince everyone. Just one person who can prove it matters." "You don't need to lie," I told Marwick. "I've seen the watch. I've held it." And she told me to pretend I hadn't. I gave her every detail I had. The drawer, the text, the pressure, and the slow smear campaign Teresa had been building to make me look unstable. Marwick didn't flinch. She didn't pat me on the back or promise I was brave. She just said, "If they're trying to retrieve evidence, they'll come back for it." Then she asked if I'd cooperate with a controlled setup. Officers would be in the home, low profile. You'd give written consent. We'd stay out of sight. Done by the book. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. At that point, I was already in the middle of it. Might as well do it the right way. We picked a night that lined up with bad weather. Forecast said snow starting at dusk and getting worse through midnight. Wind, poor visibility, icy roads, the kind of night someone might use to move through town unnoticed. I told Teresa I needed one honest conversation, that I'd found something in her drawer I didn't understand. I kept my voice calm, just like she taught me. Perry came over that evening with Jasper and settled in at my kitchen table. Jasper, thrilled to be part of whatever we were doing, dropped a soaked tennis ball at Marwick's boots and waited like it was his job. She didn't kick him out, just nudged the ball aside with her foot and said, "Dog's better trained than most adults I know." Using the same small brass key I'd taken from Teresa's coat, I unlocked the drawer just long enough for Marwick to tuck a tiny recorder beside the locked box and for me to lay a plain white envelope on top. No note inside, just a decoy. We didn't plant evidence. The watch was already there. If Teresa came back, it wouldn't be because she had questions. It would be because she couldn't help herself. By 11 o'clock, the snow was thick as fog. Wind slapped the porch like it had something personal to say. I was standing in the living room, lights low, pretending to flip through a book when I saw headlights cut across the wall. 2 vehicles pulling into the drive, too fast for the conditions. My dash cam caught both. Teresa came through the door like she was late for a presentation. She didn't knock. She used her key, stepped in, and shut the door behind her like this was her place and I was the guest. Then walked in behind her. Seeing him in my house made my stomach turn. He didn't even hesitate. Looked around like he was already mentally redecorating. He whispered something low to Teresa. Couldn't catch the words, but the way he hovered behind her, it wasn't nervous. It was coordinated. Teresa didn't even glance at me. She went straight down the hallway toward the den. Followed close, voice still low. I stepped forward enough to hear one line clearly. "He's supposed to be asleep," Teresa hissed. That's when I knew this wasn't cleanup. This was control. They weren't afraid of what I might do. They were afraid of what I already knew. Jasper heard her, too. The moment she touched the drawer handle, he lost it. Barked sharp and hard. Lunged forward. Perry had to grip the leash with both hands. Jasper wasn't being aggressive. He was trying to alert. That bark wasn't noise. It was danger. I didn't need to play dumb anymore. I stepped into the hallway and said clear and loud, "What are you doing?" Teresa turned around slow, face still neutral, eyes cold. "Curtis is having an episode," she said flatly. "He's been under stress. He's imagining things." Reese stepped toward me, jaw set, chest puffed slightly, just enough to try and rattle me. "Easy, buddy," he said. "Let's not escalate things." And that's when Marwick stepped in. She and another officer moved in from the back hallway, coordinated, quiet entry, just like she'd promised. Teresa froze, not in panic, but in irritation. Her face didn't show fear. It showed inconvenience. Marwick raised her hand and said, "Ma'am, step away from the drawer." But Teresa didn't. She yanked the drawer open fast, grabbed a cloth-wrapped object, and shoved it into her tote bag like she'd done it before. That was the tell. She didn't hesitate. She knew exactly where it was, exactly how it was packed. There was no searching, no guessing. Marwick moved fast. "Set the bag down," she ordered. Teresa tried to play calm, like she was just holding her own property. But Marwick already had gloves on and a body cam rolling. She opened the tote, pulled out the cloth, unwrapped it. Inside the engraved bracelet watch, Kayla Hill, 30th birthday. But that wasn't all. Tucked beside it was a cheap flip phone. One of those throwaway burner models you buy with cash at a gas station. Marwick turned it on, scrolled quickly, then held it out for the other officer to witness. Message threads, names, dates, location pings, references to cash transfers, and a final note that said, "Get the dog out first." Makes her look weak. No witnesses. Perry hadn't moved. Jasper had gone quiet again, eyes locked on Teresa, tail low. He didn't need to bark now. The house was speaking for itself. Marwick photographed everything on her body cam. Logged it out loud for the recording. Time, date, contents. Then she turned to Teresa and said, "You have the right to remain silent." Teresa didn't resist, but she did try one last move. "I want it on record," she said, smooth as ever. "That Curtis planted all of this. He's been erratic, unstable. You'll see. But that's why we done it this way." The dash cam, the audio recorder, Perry, Marwick, even Jasper. They could try to spin a story, but the timeline couldn't be bent. Not this time. The body cam footage, the dash cam timestamps, the messages on the burner phone, they all did their job. But that didn't mean I walked into school the next day like a man cleared. That's not how it works in a town like ours. People don't wait for court dates. They pick a version of the story that makes sense to them, then pass it around like a casserole. For 2 solid weeks, I could feel it. Parents hesitating at pickup. Colleagues pausing too long in the copy room. Kids whispering just loud enough for me to hear, then going quiet when I turned around. HR still made me sit through their little wellness meeting. Nothing personal, just protocol. Teresa being arrested didn't cancel the paper trail she'd spent months building. She'd played it smart, planted doubt before I had a chance to get ahead of it. Bureaucracy doesn't care that your wife is wearing an orange jumpsuit. It cares about liability. Principal Vaughn was the exception. She looked me in the eye, didn't fake a smile, and said, "I'm glad you're still standing." Most wouldn't be. Zach stuck close in the way only kids know how to do without making it obvious. He'd hang around after the bell, pretend he forgot something, then wander up to my desk with some weird fact about frogs or a joke that didn't quite land. One afternoon he said, "If anybody says you're the bad guy, I'll tell them my dog disagrees." I laughed harder than I'd laughed in months. About 3 weeks after the arrest, I got a call from Marwick. "Kayla's awake," she said, not fully steady, but aware. She asked about her son. I asked if I could visit just once to bring back something to Zach, some proof that his mom was still his mom. Marwick cleared it with the hospital. I went in after school. No badge, no formality, just a plain visitor's sticker on my chest and a get well drawing Zach had made that morning with a superhero mom and a dog flying next to her. Kayla looked smaller than I expected, hollowed out from weeks of tubes and silence, but her eyes were sharp, awake, watching. I handed her the drawing and said, "Zach wanted you to have this." She didn't smile right away, but her hand tightened just slightly on the page and her eyes didn't leave it. She whispered hoarse but clear. "He's okay." "Yeah," I said. "He's got good people watching out for him." She closed her eyes and breathed in slow like she was finally allowed to. Then she looked straight at me and said, "She was there, Teresa." I know her voice. She couldn't speak for long, but she told me what mattered. Teresa wasn't a stranger to her. Their companies had overlapped. Teresa had tried to pitch some kind of partnership. Something Kayla said smelled wrong from the start. She'd rejected it. Teresa hadn't liked that. "She doesn't yell," Kayla said. "She speaks low, sharp, like she wants to be the last voice in the room." Those were the exact words Teresa had used on me too many times to count. Later, Marwick explained the full picture. Ree hadn't just wanted money. He wanted full control. Legal power, medical authority, access to assets. If Kayla died, he got it all. If she stayed in a coma, same thing. The plan worked either way as long as nobody questioned it too soon. And if anyone did, make them look unstable. Teresa's family tried to pressure the county at first. Donations, old favors, whispers about reputation, but the burner phone, the messages, the recovered watch, that was a clean chain. One broken link and it all unraveled. The school district pulled Hawthorne freight from the transportation bid without making a scene. But locally, everyone knew. Teresa's name had weighed before after the arrest. That weight snapped the rope. People stopped returning her family's calls, stopped pretending they didn't see the cracks. Teresa filed for divorce from jail through a lawyer, of course. Claimed I was emotionally abusive. Said I'd become erratic and controlling over the past year. The irony would have been hilarious if it didn't threaten my job. With Kayla's statement, plus the dash cam footage showing Reese and Teresa arriving at my house together, Marwick helped me get my name cleared officially. District HR backed off. The letter in my file got sealed. I didn't throw a party, but I slept through the night for the first time in months. Perry kept Jasper while the court sorted out Zach's living situation. Kid custody cases move slow, even when the facts are obvious. But Jasper didn't seem to mind. He handled it all the same way he always had, with a wagging tail, a slobbery tennis ball, and a kind of unshakable loyalty that made the worst days seem less impossible. He'd gotten all of us through the worst season of our lives. By late spring, the ice finally gave up and the sidewalk stopped trying to break ankles. People in town went back to smiling like they hadn't spent the winter watching each other through fogged-up windows, wondering who was lying. Teresa and Ree were still bouncing between hearings. My divorce paperwork crawled along behind them, slow and overpriced like every legal thing in America. But the first real win, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some big courtroom moment or public apology. It was the afternoon Principal Vaughn knocked on my classroom door, handed me a sealed envelope, and said, "HR's closing everything out. No action taken. You handled a hard year with more patience than most people have." Then she nodded once and walked away. I sat in my truck in the lot for a solid 10 minutes after that. Didn't cry, didn't scream, just breathed like I'd been holding it for months without noticing. Kayla started rehab a week later. I checked in without hovering. Recovery wasn't clean or smooth. She'd get dizzy from standing too long, then insist on doing the next rep anyway. She reminded me of the kids in my classroom who hate being told when to slow down. Strong, stubborn, and full of fight. Zach moved in with Kayla's sister while she got steady on her feet again. He still came by my room before the bell some mornings, acting like it was no big deal. He'd toss out a fact about volcanoes or ask if I knew that platypuses didn't have stomachs. I'd nod, play along. Outside like clockwork. Perry and Jasper would be waiting in the pickup loop. Jasper always wagging. Perry always sipping coffee and watching the world like he'd seen it all already. Perry surprised me. He never overstepped. Never acted like a stand-in dad. He just showed up. Dog walks, quick check-ins, small moments that stacked up into something steady. When Zach made a joke that landed too sharp, covering a bad day, Perry was the one who put a hand on his shoulder and let the silence do the work. The sentencing hearing came in early June. Teresa came in with her hair flat-ironed and her lawyer voice on, like she still believed this was a misunderstanding. Race looked like a man who couldn't figure out why the con didn't land. I didn't go up there to deliver a speech. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood and said, "You tried to turn my life into a story nobody would believe, and it didn't work." Then I sat back down. That was enough. Teresa lost her board seat at the family company once investigators started tracing her side deals with Ree. Every hand she thought would protect her turned to stone. Her name stopped meaning power. Reese's little empire of control fell apart the second Kayla lived and remembered. Lies make noise, but they don't hold up once the facts show up. Kayla and I didn't jump into anything. We weren't playing house. We didn't light candles and pretend it was fate. But we built trust slow. Me helping with Zach's homework, her letting me drive her to therapy appointments when her balance was off. We had dinners where nobody raised their voice. That was enough for now. I kept the house, not because it was a win, but because it was mine. The one place Teresa couldn't spin into a false version of me. I repainted the den, changed the drawer lock. It wasn't revenge, it was air. By the start of the next school year, Zach smiled more. Jasper kept being a goofball who acted like every stick in the yard was a trophy. And me, I got back to being what I've always been, a stubborn man who doesn't quit. Especially when a kid's watching to see what that looks like.